Thanks so much for joining us for this reading. There we go. I hope you've all been enjoying the weekend and this amazing virtual con. I'm going to be reading one of my stories from my collection And Other Disasters, which has short stories and poetry, and which you can buy directly from the publishers, Mason Jar Press, or from any of your fine booksellers. And I'm going to be reading my story, The Divided. It's about a 10-minute story, so we'll have quite a bit of time after for any questions that you have, either about this story, this book, or other books, or whatever within reason. The Divided. The walls rose anyway. They couldn't build them. They'll never do it. There's no humanly possible way they can do it in any reasonable amount of time with any reasonable amount of money. That's what my tia Lola had been saying since the idea appeared, and she wasn't wrong. But they rose anyway, crawling their way to the sky like thorn bushes, like sudden ramparts, like instant slices of mesa. My abuela was caught in one on her way to work. That's how we knew they rose so quickly, because it caught her in mid-stride. On Sundays, we went to visit her. My father rubbed baby oil into the heel of her left foot, raised slightly out of the back of her work pumps. Que lástima that you were caught in those uncomfortable shoes. He talked to her all the time, although since we couldn't see her ears, I was pretty certain she couldn't hear him. He rubbed Nivea into the creases of her right elbow, pushed back with the weight of the black leather purse we knew was tucked under her arm, only a corner of it visible below her elbow. Sometimes my mother would come with a bucket of water and shampoo and undo the last twist of bun that protruded from the wall. She would wash the 3 inches of gray hair, the very ends of my abuela's long hair that normally would sway at her waist, and now only fluttered from the wall like a sad flag. Then she would pat them dry with a marigold yellow towel and wrap the bun up again. So unfortunate that she was caught facing that way, my father would say, because my abuela barely spoke English, and we imagined that they didn't allow Spanish over there anymore. We imagined because we didn't know. No stories came out. We didn't know if my abuela was worse off or my prima Leti, who was trapped somewhere on the inside. She wasn't in the wall. My tío Cesar went all the way around it looking for her, meter by meter. He thought he would be able to sneak in somewhere, but the walls went all the way around. The river was all fucked up, he told us when he came back, and the ocean crashed against walls now. No more beaches, no more cliffs. He held out some hope he would be able to cross in from Canada, but the walls had risen there too, trapping people and cars, even a few border agents. He didn't find Leti in the wall, so she had to be on the inside. We waited. Surely they would deport people, but no one appeared. Maybe they couldn't figure out how to get them through the wall. No stories came out, and yet we had stories. Some people said they had done it on purpose, found some new chemical industrial witchcraft. Others said it was a judgment on them, even when it felt more like a judgment on us. Analysts predicted war and anarchy, said that inside, the crops would be failing and people would be starving and squabbling. That was hard to grasp, though, all that money and power rotting away so quickly. It was easier to imagine that inside, they were engineering monsters or killer robots, triaging their victims expertly by melanin content or neurolinguistic pathways. We imagined them coming for us, clawing their way through the wall or marching along a path that opened for them at the touch of a button. We imagined them coming for us in tanks and F-16s, followed by our lost relatives and friends transformed into a zombie army. We imagined this happening, and then we made movies about it. Blob monsters fermented from a stew of nitrates and untreated sewage. Super soldiers without hearts or cavities, all steely eyes and square jaws. Instead, what came was what they call blight. People started moving away, not because of fear, but because there were few jobs and no buyers from the north and nothing coming down from the north to buy. And then once people started moving, there were fewer jobs. My father had to close his barber shop, but he was hired at the hotel where my mother worked, because the one industry that remained was tourism. I sold flowers at a little stand near the wall for people to leave by the edges of their loved ones, or in memory of those who were unreachable. The first time someone asked me about the best flowers for the wall itself, I didn't understand the question. I shook my head and wrote that senora off as one more person detached from reality, but people kept asking. I went to look and found shrines that were not dedicated to the lost, but to the walls themselves. People were praying that the walls would keep us safe from chemical-stained water and fracking earthquakes and particle-ridden air. I decided that the flower for this was a cactus, and over the next years we sold so many I had to start a cactus garden. But when people told me they wanted to pray the walls would keep us safe from other contaminants, from xenophobia and hate and fear, then I told them the appropriate flower was roses. Anyone foolish enough to believe walls can keep you safe from those things deserve to pay for our most expensive bloom. We stayed for 6 years, until my abuela died. I knew as soon as I saw her that Sunday, it was an instant impression like a flashbulb, but I didn't want to look at my father to see if I was right. When we got closer, we could see those knobs of skin my father used to care for so cariñosamente had changed color, gone pale and purply. And when we touched her, my father clinging to her fragment of heel with 2 fingers and a thumb while I pressed one fingertip to her elbow, she was cold. My father curled down and put his head on the ground and cried for so long I started to feel sick, as if the world were spinning too fast and I didn't know what to do. There are worse stories than ours, but I don't want to tell them. Newlyweds and newborns and dying relatives of all varieties. People who did everything they could and some things that nobody could do and none of it helped. There are many worse stories, but I don't want to tell them. I wish I'd never heard them, that they had never happened. We buried my abuela in the way that had become custom, patting soil over her sad, hard heel and her elbow, patting it into a mound sloping out from the wall that covered a more or less human shape, and leaving a little memorial stone for her at the bottom. For a while, my father still went every Sunday to leave flowers and to cry. Then we moved south. Tio Cesar and Tia Lola stayed in case anyone ever came through, anyone they could ask about what happened on the other side. They were hoping to have a guess about the rest of their daughter's life, even if she never got out herself. Mainly, they were hoping to be reassured that it wasn't as anguished as what they imagined. But we moved south. I didn't think it would ever happen because my father was so sad. The only reason he managed it finally was for me. You should forget, he whispered to me the night after we crossed the desert and reached the first city that looked like a real city. We were staying in a tiny hotel. We could hear snores from the rooms next to us, the rushing of water when someone flushed a toilet on the floor above, and from the bar down the street, cumbia and sometimes bachata. You should forget and live your life. I nodded when he said that because even though they always told us to study history and remember injustice and never forget, I couldn't find any lesson here that would help me be anything but sad. Some people are afraid now, with all that's going on, that the walls will grow again, to the south of us this time. There are those who are in favor, saying it is such a tiny border we need to close, a totally different situation. But others say that if they rise, they won't just keep out the Guatemaltecos and Catrachos, but will continue all along the coasts until they meet the impenetrable walls in the north. Then we'll be the ones shut in and quarantined from the world. Others scoff and say we are still a long way from that happening. It's only talk, and not nearly as bad as it was back there, back then. Some still pray to the walls in the north, rogando that algún día they will fall away and we will find a healed land within. Maybe a healed people too, although as time passes, that idea is fading. Me, I keep my eyes on the colors in front of me. Mangos and tejidos and pink pickled onions, limones and azulejos and the potholes in the road. I listen for music, any kind of twang or resonance, any beat, and especially the voices that climb in sobbing crescendos. I trail my fingertips along the stone and concrete of buildings, knowing I could be caught at any breath, trapped for the rest of my life between one imagined country and another. That's the story, The Divided. The book is And Other Disasters, and I'll be happy to take any questions or discuss anything, whether it's about what I read or something different from my work. So the question is, what is the theme of the stories in the collection and what is coming up next? I didn't write the collection purposely to have a theme. However, my stories do tend to hit on a couple of different things. As the title suggests, disasters is one of them, of various kinds. There's also, I think, a pretty strong theme throughout the stories in the book that has to do with questions like the story I just read of otherness, of empathy. So there's one story about first contact. There's a story from the perspective of an AI. There's a couple of different iterations of some of those ideas about connection across difference. And the other theme would probably be technology and the way it affects society. So those are kind of general themes that you will find in a lot of places in my work. Any other questions? Can be about writing. Oh, sorry, and what is coming up next? Right. I have several works in process, including one on sub, but I'm not going to actually talk about any of those. You can also read in addition to my trilogy that starts with infomocracy and then includes null states and state tectonics. You can also read my work at Serial Box, where I created the Serial Ninth Step Station. I'm the showrunner for the sequel to Orphan Black called Orphan Black: The Next Chapter, and I also write for Machina, for Anne Wild's serial. And I have a number of short stories that have been coming out, including one in the recent Saga Best SFF from last year. So I have a lot of things going on, but I don't have something specific that I can talk about yet to look forward to coming up. So read my old stuff, follow me on Twitter, maybe follow on my WordPress site and on my Facebook author page for as long as I can stand to keep that up. And you will hear about new things that are in fact in the pipeline. And I do see in the Discord that someone is typing, whether it's a question or not. I'm going to give a little more time and we'll see if anything else comes up. And I'm also happy to talk about writing more generally if people have questions. If not, I'm happy to not talk anymore. That's also okay. You do not have to ask questions. How is writing for TV different than books? I don't actually write for TV. The Orphan Black sequel is for Serial Box, which is audio and text, but it is immersive audio. It is with sound effects, and the Orphan Black one in particular is voiced by Tatiana Maslany, who, if you don't know, is the amazing actor in Orphan Black. And so that's quite incredible. So it is a little bit different in that it is both meant to be a serial thing and also that it does have audio as a really strong component, even though you can read them as text only. And it was particularly interesting to do for Orphan Black because that is a series that has a lot of visual impact, both in the design and in the plot specifics, which I'm not going to go into for anyone who has missed it. If you've missed it, it's an amazing TV series. You should watch it. It's on Netflix. It's from BBC America. So we had to think a lot about how to both use the medium that we had, both use the audio in ways to do things that they couldn't do on the television show, and also get around some of the problems that it created. On a television show, if two people look similar, you see that right away. in audio, you have to describe it, and it's a very different feeling. So, so that was really interesting. And of course, it's very different writing collaboratively than writing by yourself. I kind of like doing both a lot. Like I love just noodling on something on my laptop by myself, not showing it to anyone for months and months, and taking my time and figuring out where it's going. But it's really nice to take a break from that and do a bunch of plotting with a bunch of other people who have really interesting, sparky narrative brains and come up with cool stuff that I probably wouldn't have come up with by myself, and then, you know, co-edit and work together writing it. So yeah, both of those are a lot of fun. And yeah, any other questions? I suppose I could potentially read like a poem or something, but I kind of think that, you know, you can read my stuff anytime you want, and you can't ask me questions anytime you want. Well, you could try on Twitter, but you're not guaranteed. So, so I like to leave time for questions. Plus, there's only 4 minutes left. So buy my book, buy my other books, buy other people's other books, support indie bookstores, and support authors, and enjoy the rest of your con. And I will still sit here for the next 3 minutes and wait and see if anyone else has any last minute questions. And I will probably be in Discord for a little bit after that as well, although I have another con that I have to test the technology for in a little while, so I can't stay on too long. So thank you all very much for coming. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked hearing me read that story, I will tell you also that there's an audio project called The Disquiet Junto, which I will put in the chat, which is a group of avant-garde musicians who come up with challenges every week. And one of their challenges was to take a recording of me reading that story and do a soundtrack to it using mainly my voice reading the story, which they then fiddled with in all sorts of cool ways. So you can look that up with my name, and you should find it if you're interested in how people saw a soundscape to that story using mostly the sound of me reading it to make the different effects.